and then join with me, if you will, in reciting the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be your name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For yours is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
Today's scripture reading comes from Genesis chapter 50, verses 13 through 21. They carried him to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave in the field of Macapha, near Mamre, which Abraham had brought along with the field as a burial place from Ephron the Hittite. After burying his father, Joseph returned to Egypt, together with his brothers and all the others who had gone with him to bury his father. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "What if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrongs we did to him?" So they sent word to Joseph, saying, "Your father left these instructions before he died. This is what you are to say to Joseph. I ask you to forgive your brothers the sins and the wrongs they committed in treating you so badly. Now please forgive the sins of the servants of the God of your father." When their message came to him, Joseph wept. His brothers then came and threw themselves down before him. "We are your slaves," they said. But Joseph said to them, "Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then, don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children." And he reassured them and spoke kindly to them. May the Lord add his blessings to this reading.
Tuesdays when Ming is here to fill in. I understand we're going to have you most of the month of October coming up, so looking forward to that. Wow, Casey gets to go and join her husband and family in Korea. It is a phrase I am sure we have all heard it, and we've heard it time and time again. And most likely we have said it ourselves on more than one occasion. It's a phrase that we speak with authority, with complete faith in its validity. We never doubt for a moment whether it is true or not, but we simply accept it as such, accepting this phrase as if they were the words of God himself, but God never spoke them. For this phrase is not found anywhere in the scriptures, but at the same time, it speaks one of the greatest truths about the faith we are a part of, the God that we are worshiping, and the scriptures which reveal him to us. Yes, it is a vitally important phrase, which allows us to attempt to understand or explain, to come to grips with the events that happen around us, events which cannot be explained or understood by mere human knowledge, for they simply baffle us. But in time, they become understandable. They become explainable when we accept these things that happen as what they are. Actions of our God and Creator, who is constantly working and interacting in our lives, though most of the time we are never aware of it. This is what we hear when we learn about this phrase, God works in mysterious ways. Let's all say that. God works in mysterious ways. And how many of us at times have said that and just nod? Because we look at that situation and we have no idea how in the world it ever happened. But there it is. It's a non-biblical phrase that's backed up by a quote from the book of Isaiah, where God is quoted as saying, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than yours, and my thoughts higher than your thoughts." There is much in this world, much that happens in this world that is mysterious to us. And that's not a put down, for we are, after all, merely human. Even though some of us think of ourselves as divine now and then. But yes, merely human. And as such, what God may do for each of us, all of us, the world around us, is often beyond our human understanding, exceeding our human ability to understand. Most likely you've heard about those things in medical things, where the doctors will come out and say, it's a miracle. How many have heard that or had that experience in their life? We had no idea that they would recover, that they would pull through, that we would find the answer, that suddenly the solution would come. And even doctors, with all their scientific knowledge, will say, God's mysteries, God at work. Actions which happen, at least on the surface, may appear to be the exact opposite of what we would do. And we look at things happening around us, and we don't understand them. But if we were able to see, and I like this phrase, with God's eyes, we might come to grasp the fact that even when things appear to be confusing to us, even when they appear to be distressing to us, definitely not the way we would have dealt with the situation, actually, in the long run, they turn out to be purposeful, good, and yes, even beneficial ways of dealing with it. Wow, that really is something. Where we go, we had no idea that the result of this would come from that. You've heard me tell the stories. It's like how my sister and her first husband came to know one another, only after that tragic accident that nearly claimed her life. Wow, who would have known that I would have found the love of my life as the nurse taking care of me each and every day. Now, this is something, believe it or not, which I have learned about, this God working in mysterious ways. We studied it in my religious studies courses, and maybe less understandably, I learned a perfect example of this in my 6th grade science curriculum, which I taught year after year. And I came across a perfect example of something that the world tells us is bad, that the news world tells us is horrible, that is on every news station, every radio station, every newspaper as being terribly destructive. But I'm here to tell you from this example, it's just the opposite. For it was during the teaching on my lessons on ecology that I came across something, an example of where God understands what is happening and why it needs to happen, and we simply don't. And what that is, what I taught my students, is the fact that forest fires are good. Listen to that. Forest fires are good. And you might even go so far as to say they are necessary evils. How many people know that's true and have any idea why that forest fires are good? Yes, now this is long before we started putting our houses in the middle of forests, that we went ahead and put cities in the middle of forests. But originally, they were one of the greatest things because they work as a cleansing agent, which essentially does away with the old to make way for the new. Just burns off all the things that is no longer needed, no longer of value, and makes way for the new. They are a natural process. I found these in my notes. I went back and found them, which rejuvenates entire ecosystems. It clears out the dead vegetation, and all that burnt material becomes nutrients in the soil that allow other things to grow. Wow. And then it stimulates the growth of diverse plants. Instead of old, prickly, dry things, new, young, tender, diverse plants come, and all the wildlife feed on it, going, oh my gosh, this is the best we have had in so long. And even, believe it or not, the pine trees are prepared for the fires. Do you know that pine cones under heat open up and they drop seeds onto the ground? And they do not open until they're in heat. They're like reservoirs, they're like bank accounts. And when the fire opens, they open up fully and the seeds go to the ground, allowing new seedlings to grow. Wow. Yes, forest fires are good for the environment, though not perhaps for those who chose to build their houses there. It is an example of how God looks at something in his mysterious ways, and while everything around us is telling us these forest fires are terrible, God is saying it's just what needed to be done. Wow. Now, having said that, let me segue into what everyone considers the perfect biblical example of bad things happening to a person that eventually ends up being good. And it uses the phrase, listen to this one, God uses man's evil for good. How many have heard that? God uses man's evil for good. And it's a thought that comes from Romans 8:28, where it says, God works all things together, both good and bad, for the good of those who love him. And so when we see a bad thing that's happening, what we have to do is try to look with God's eyes further down the road. We have to expand our vision to the left and the right, up and down, to realize what is going to be gained from this terrible thing that has happened to us. Well, that brings us to the story of the most up and down man in all the Bible, who at various points in his life, due to the actions of others, he would hit rock bottom. And at other times, his life would be riding high as on the crest of a wave. A man whom I'm sure you have all heard about, because you've read the scriptures about him, you've heard the sermons about him, and if you were a fan of Andrew Lloyd Webber, you have seen the play. You have listened to the soundtrack. And that is, of course, Joseph and its amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. Anybody ever see that on the stage? It was my era. Anybody have the album which they did and played over and over again? Joseph and his amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. Now Joseph, to make a very long story short, was the favorite of 12 sons of a man named Jacob, who would one day be named Israel and would be the George Washington of that nation. At this time, speaking of clothing, everyone wore one-piece, solid-colored, over-the-head type smocks. That was all they made. It was functional, and it worked. But Jacob went out of his way for his favorite son. He must have paid a fortune to give him a coat. Now, some verses say it was a coat of many colors. Some people said it was a coat that had sleeves. But either way, Joseph had a coat that no other one had, and he was not quiet about it. You can see him standing in front of his brothers going, "Look at what I got and you didn't. My daddy loves me more than he loves you." And he just, I'm sorry, was not the best of persons there. Not only that, Joseph kept having dreams that he was going to be far better than anyone. And instead of keeping his mouth shut about it, he said, "I had a dream where the sun and the moon and 11 stars, representing mom, dad, and you, all bowed down to me." Oh boy, did the other brothers love to hear that, don't you think? And he would go on with this time and time again until they had had enough. And they decided to do away with Joseph. And so they took him out into the wilderness and they put him in a deep pit where they were going to let him die slowly. That was a pretty bad thing, don't you think? But then some slavers were going by and they said, "Hey, why don't we even get a benefit from this?" They pulled him out of the pit and they sold him into slavery. Another bad thing. Wow. But Joseph was incredible. He was a special blessed one of God. And when he gets to the situation where he has been bought, he is so good at what he does that he rises up to be head of the entire household. While the owner of all of these people puts him in charge of the slaves, puts him in charge of the field workers, puts him in charge of his economics and things. And soon Joseph is feeling pretty darn good about himself because he has it as good as it can be. So from the pit, from the slavery, he's now looking good. Until the man's wife accuses him of trying to force himself on her. It was not what he had tried to do. But they believed it, and they took him from his time position. What did they do? They put him back in jail. Down, down, up, down. Wow. So at this point, Joseph had been looking like he was riding the crest of the wave, and that he could handle anything, until the false accusations brought him down again. So if we stop the story at this point, it would look like nothing good could come from it. But then, while he was in prison, people needed their dreams interpreted. There were two different people who worked for the Pharaoh himself. They both had dreams. Joseph interpreted the dreams for them. And wow, how great it was to know what they meant. And word got to the Pharaoh that there was someone in prison who could understand dreams. Well, the Pharaoh was dealing with a nightmare every single night. He had this dream of 7 healthy cows that came one after another and brought bounty to the land. And then, do you know the story? Then there were 7 scrawny, horrible cows who came and ate up the good ones, and devastation followed. The Pharaoh called all his leaders, he called all his wizards, he called all his priests to tell him what that meant, and they couldn't tell him. So he brought Joseph out of the prison. What does it mean? With God's help, Joseph told him, "You are going to have 7 years of bounty for the empire of Egypt, where your crops are going to be overflowing, followed by 7 years of drought where nothing will grow. So you must prepare now for the later so you can get through." Pharaoh was so impressed that he takes this man from the prison. He
He brings him up to being the number 2 person in Egypt, serving right under the Pharaoh, and puts him in charge of getting Egypt through that for that 14-year period. Let's see. Pit, slavery, head of the household, accused of a crime, back in jail, brought back out, interprets dreams, and suddenly he is in the top of the world again. Wow. Now, why this is important is that the land of Egypt is not the only area that has a drought. All the nations of the world had a drought, including Israel. And Jacob and his family were starving. But they heard there was food to be had in Egypt. So Jacob sends the other brothers to see if they could get some. And who do they run into? Oh my God. Is it him? I thought we said, oh, we're in trouble now. And so they're looking, going, oh my gosh. And they're waiting for his punishment to come down upon them. But God had placed Joseph in that position for a reason, to help not only his immediate family, but the entire world get through this difficult time. And Joseph says this incredible line, let's see, I've learned, what did you intended this for evil, but God intended it for good. Because God had a master plan that he could see that no one else could. And believe it or not, it required Joseph to fall from the glory of his father into the pit, and then to be raised up and dropped down so he could be in the right place at the right time. God had a plan in motion, for he works in mysterious ways. And Joseph embraced his brothers after a little subterfuge now and then, where he made them sweat it out a bit. You should read the story. It's about 5 chapters long. But he embraced them all, welcomed them all, provided for them land for their generations and the ones that follow, got Egypt through the entire time of the drought, fed all the known world, and God sat back and said, you did good on my behalf. Wow. So, what does that mean for us? It means for us that at times when we see things happening in the world and we do not understand them, it does not mean God isn't already at work. That sometimes we have to wait just a bit longer for God to reveal to us what he wants us to do. It makes such a huge difference. I had that in my own life, and I have to share these stories because, you know, I testify from my life. I'm 15 years old. My mom has been married to my alcoholic stepfather for 5 years, who is preparing to send me off to military school at the New Mexico Military Institute in Roswell, New Mexico, so that I could become the perfect soldier, go on to West Point, get stars on my shoulders. And that's what I was destined to do. But Mom said, no, you've already scared off his older brother, and I will not let you send him away. And so my mother left him with us and divorced him, brought us back to North Hollywood, where we were raised, to let us start over. And as you have heard, it was at North Hollywood High that I met Rob McClure. Rob, who then invited me to the youth groups, the Christian Youth Fellowship at First Christian Church North Hollywood, where I came under the teaching of Robert Bach, my primary mentor in ministry. The church where I would decide to go into the ministry would support me all the way through my seminary training. And I would not have gotten there if it had not been for the divorce, that difficult time when Mom had to admit she made a mistake, and we're going to leave that behind us, and I'm going to be put in a new position. I'm sure God did not really want my mother to suffer for those years, but what he did was take the evil that was happening and turn it into a good situation. And my entire family then joined the church, one after another. My sister came, my mother joined, my grandmother joined, and here we are, disciples, some 45 years later. So, I need you to keep your eyes open and your heart open to what God is doing in your lives. It is amazing what he can do. And we may not immediately understand why. We may not immediately understand how. But God is going to take each thing that happens in our life and turn it around for good. And so, yes, I love that. The poor people, my tech people, when I go off sermon, they just love things like that. God is working behind the scenes in your life. And so we say, Lord, I'm not sure how this is going to work out, but I know you are in control. So I'm going to put my faith in you. I'm going to put my trust in you. And I'm going to sit back and let it happen. That's our story for today. And let us move on to our hymn.